Hey friend, welcome to the Halfway to Dead podcast. I'm your host, Jen Lovell. Listen, you and I have reached that age where we are done with the bullshit. We know that midlife is our chance to flip the script and experience life on our own terms. It's time to reconnect with our higher selves and reclaim our inner peace. Are you ready with an open heart and an open mind? Awesome, you're in the right place. Hop in and ride shotgun with me on this midlife spiritual journey. Hey guys, Jen here. I want to start off by just putting out a little, casting call type of thing. I am looking for people in their midlife spiritual awakening right now. Doesn't matter what phase you're in. You can be just starting out. You can still be in the closet, the old spiritual closet. You can be much further along wherever you're at. I'm wanting to do a series where I interview actual midlifers in their spiritual journey. You do not need to host a podcast, write a book, offer spiritual services, nothing. There are no prerequisites other than you feel like your story would help others to listen, because I want us all to unite as a community so we feel less alone. So if you're listening right now and you think you have a story to share and you would be open to come on and share it with me on the show, I am totally willing for you to stay anonymous if that's where you are right now. You know, I talk about the spiritual closet. If you're in it and you don't want to share your name or anything, go ahead. It's okay. I still want you to come on and share your story with me. So if that's you, I would love for you to shoot me an email or a message to the website and let me know. Okay. Now today I interviewed Kris Land. He is the award-winning author of The Infinity Within and a visionary creator whose work bridges spiritual awakening, healing, and conscious creation. He is a veteran CEO and serial entrepreneur who has founded 12 high-tech companies, achieving 11 successful exits and 1 IPO. After a profound personal and professional transformation, he dedicated his life to helping people remember who they truly are and live from truth and wholeness. He's also a husband and father to 3 boys. And Kris is a deep thinker, you guys. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as did I his book, The Infinity Within. He tells a little bit of his story, and then we get into some of the concepts in the book. We talk about 4 rules he's come up with, and this is what he calls trifecta, which is to help us get through what we talk about as the game of life, which is like, what we're all enduring right now here on Earth. So we go through some cool, deep concepts, and I just really enjoy the way his brain works. I think it works kind of quick and deep like mine does sometimes. So let's jump in there and just open your minds to everything that Kris has to share. Hey, Kris, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, Jen.
I'm excited to start going over all these things. So I kind of let everybody know a little bit of your background, but I want to start by you just telling us about how you got to the point you're at now, because you've done a lot of things, Kris. So how did we get to the point of the book we're about to talk about and where you're at in your spiritual journey right now?
Perfect. So it all started in North Dakota when I was a child. I had a lot of strange things happen that are not normal. I had my first pretty significant out-of-body experience when I was 6 years old. And then I had multiple times where that happened. Of course, my parents, meaning well, told me that I imagined it or that it was dreams or whatever.
So when you say you had out of body, where were you going? What did you see?
So,
do you remember?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was completely awake at the times that it happened. At 6, what happened is I was sitting on the floor and I was just kind of playing with my toys and things. And all of a sudden, my perception shifted in such a way that I could see kind of everywhere. I could hear voices and things from everywhere, and everything had the texture and feeling of smoke or of tissue paper. And I remember I had a wooden toy train in front of me, and I went to pick it up, and it didn't compress in my fingers, but when I picked it up, it had the consistency of smoke or tissue paper. So even though it was there, it was both there and not there. It scared the crap out of me, and so I ran up to my parents, and then it all went away. And that was the end of it. And of course, they told me that I imagined it or it was a dream or whatever. And then at age 8, it happened again. And then at age 12, it happened again. But at 12, and this is where all the listeners can take a grain of salt with this, because I was there and it happened, but nobody else was there and saw it. So there you go. So at 12, I'd already started working and earning money and had made enough to buy something that was really cool back in the day. And that was a California King waterbed.
Oh, the waterbeds. Was it the full motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the waterbeds. Oh, those. Yep.
Yeah. Massive frame, California.
You would turn on your side and the whole thing would just jiggle you everywhere.
Slosh, yeah.
Yes.
I remember when I moved to California and I brought it with me, and there was the first earthquake I'd ever been through, actually threw me out of the bed.
I believe that.
So, yeah. So for those folks that don't know what a waterbed is, it's a giant bubble of water that is massively heavy and in a heavy frame to support all the weight, right? So I'm sitting next to the bed. My back is up against it. I go into this out-of-body experience. And again, I'm hearing voices from everywhere. And if I concentrate, I can actually listen to conversations. And I can see everywhere, like to the moon or universe. I mean, just everywhere. It was very disconcerting. But I remember saying at this point, because this has happened now 3 times, I wanted to try something, and I was now less scared of it than I was the prior times. And so I took my finger and I pushed on the waterbed, and it moved about 3 inches. That then scared the crap out of me, and I ran to my parents and went away. But the next morning when I go down, there's actually a mark in the carpet where the waterbed had been. So that was my first significant shift in it's make-believe and I'm making it up and it's not happening to, okay, there's a lot more going on here than we're told. And what's real is now feeling very illusionary, what's real. And then what is happening might be a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, right? So then at 15, in North Dakota, you're allowed to drive earlier because we lived out of town on a ranch. So I had a near-death experience that could have just as easily been a death experience that also significantly shifted my perception on what's going on. And then I was selling Apple II computers at the time, which will again age me. And the gentleman that bought one from me, he wanted to do accounting software. So I knew how to program. He knew what he needed, and we did that. And then at age 17, I sold my first company, made a bunch of money, and within about 6 months went into a deep depression. I didn't understand why. Now, nowadays, people talk about stories where you win the lottery and people destroy their lives after winning the lottery and so on and so forth. I have a perspective from my point of view on what happened for me, which is I had done everything that I was told that I was supposed to do to be successful. And I was left with this huge hole of, now what? What do I do next?
And that's a really young age to have that hit.
Yeah. At age 17, I was like, yeah, now what?
Right.
Which is probably why the deep depression hit, right? So I ended up coming up with 3 goals that I can never fully achieve, that I can always do. And that helped me kind of climb out of that space. And then I was hired at a bank in San Diego. And my boss, his name was Kris as well. In one of our discussions, he told me he was an atheist, which is fine. I don't have a problem with anybody wanting to believe anything they want to believe. But for me, it didn't sit right for him. So I got very curious about it into what does that really mean? What does that really look like? And in doing it, I ended up coming up with 4 questions that you can ask pretty much anybody. And it doesn't prove we have a soul. But what it does do is it shows that all the upside is in believing we have a soul, and all the downside is in believing we don't, regardless of whether we do or don't. But then that left me with a brand new question. Great. If we have a soul, what is it? What's it doing here? What's the purpose?
Yeah.
And so then
it sounds like you're a real deep thinker, Kris, from a very early age. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I started building my own filing systems and stuff when I was 10. So I was very much what would be considered both a computer geek and an introvert as a child. I did not get along well with my peers. I did not have much to talk to them about. And I had my own way of thinking and doing things.
Yeah, you had big thoughts going on when all the other kids were just worrying about like what they were going to play at the playground. Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that you have an out-of-body experience at 6, right? It's that kind of dislocates
So
the
this
normal.
whole time in a family that's practicing a religion, or no?
Yeah,
were you just open to all the things?
Well, both my folks, they never pressured me into a particular religion, but we did go to United Methodist, and I even helped my mom teach Sunday school for younger kids. And so I understood a lot about the United Methodist point of view. I also had a number of friends in Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also very curious about religions, kind of in the same way I was in technology. So I studied things like Sanskrit, Egyptian background, and thoughts of reincarnation, Buddhism, Christianity, and the Gnostic point of view. And we could go on and on and on. So I've studied, I don't know, about hundreds, but many, many, many tens of different religions. And even as a younger person, up until when I started asking questions about the soul, what I found was that in all the different religions, the semantics are very different. But when I boiled them down, which is kind of from my science background, I tend to boil things down into the simplest form I can.
Mm-hmm.
They all kind of say the same thing, which is fascinating.
Yes.
It was very fascinating to me back then and still is today. It's like we have all these different religions and there's people that feel very strongly about them, which is great. But for me, what happened is as I boiled the semantics down, it all kind of said the same thing to me. So when you combine questioning a soul with my background of odd things happening and then my background of theology, it started me down this path of great. If we have a soul, what is it? And the easiest way to answer it for me at the time was to use the Bible, which is arguably the most read book on the planet. There are a number of chapter and verses, and I don't mean one or two or three, I mean a bunch that say things along the line of, we are the children of God. And Jesus telling his disciples, you will do everything I have done and much more. And how we inherit the earth and can bring heaven on earth here. And just all kinds of really interesting things. And so that led me down the path of, okay, well, let's go out on a branch here and say that maybe a soul and what we are is this infinite being that's inside this game that, for the lack of better words, let's call it the game of earth. Now, why did I come up with a game? Well, first I said, okay, if we're a soul being, what do I do? What does a soul being do? Well, first off, by the definition of a soul, we exist outside of space and time. Great. I could only come up with three things that a soul being does. Create stuff, universes and planets and constructs and things, destroy stuff, and play games. It's the only three things I could come up with.
And you're coming up with this from your biblical studies, all the studies from all the religions. Were you channeling it? Where was this coming from when you were coming up with it?
When I started coming up with the construct, it felt more like a download than anything. Because what was going on in the Infinity Within, in the book that ended up from this story, Gabriel, so it's kind of a non-fictional memoir. It talks a lot about things that happened to me through my life through the lens of a fictional character named Gabriel, and his name was intentionally chosen. And then he goes by Gabe. But instead of being downloaded a bunch of information, he meets his mentor Elias at about age 20 at a coffee shop. And then Elias, being a wonderful mentor, doesn't preach or tell Gabriel anything. He asks lots of questions.
So hold the phone. All right. So just for my friends listening, this book is called The Infinity Within. Break through fear, trust your inner power, and create a life that reflects who you truly are. And like you said, it's a mix of memoir, mysticism, and lived experience. So I listened to the audiobook when I was traveling this past weekend. So I kept thinking, this feels fictional, but it also feels like it's Kris's story, but his name is Gabe. You know what I mean? So like you said, it was a download, and you download it in story form like the book is written? Okay, and that's where these characters came from, because that's kind of how you visualize?
No, the characters were purely part of... So the goal of my book, if I'd written it as a memoir, I felt like people would feel like they either would have to trust what I'm saying verbatim or not. For me, it created a potential vibrational dissonance. So I intentionally chose Gabriel and Elias as the vehicle for telling the story through, so that people can read and follow Gabe through his life in a fictional way. And then what resonates will resonate. What people want to take from it, it will mirror.
It was based in reality, because you talk about your car crash. You talk about all these things in there. So for a minute, I was like, wait, this is about Kris, but his name is Gabe. So, yes. So, but I kind of liked that it did have the feel of fiction, but knowing it is not, right? You weren't just making this
You're
all
not
up.
forced to believe anything I'm saying. You get to follow it as a story and take from it what's comfortable for you. And that's the goal.
Yes. So as we're talking, because as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, that's in the book. That's in the book. So what I did while I was listening to your audiobook, because I'm a hands-on book person usually with a highlighter and tabs, but I was listening and I was on planes and different things. So I had my notes open in my phone. And when I would hear something, I was like, ooh, I like that in my notes. Okay. So I have notes about different things that stood out to me. And we talked a little bit about when you were questioning what your soul is. And I had this down. Your soul is not something you have. It's what remains when everything else is gone. This is what you decided. And then you go into talking about this game, the game of life. But I also, after that, because we were talking a little bit about your religious, how you've studied many different religions and you've gone to the Bible. And later you say, the great teachers were never here to save you, but remind you. And you're talking about Jesus, Buddha, all these things.
All of them.
Yes. The same truth from different angles. We are not separate from the divine. We are a spark of something infinite. So these are all things through studying all the different religions and also intuitively feeling into what resonated with you. Right? That's where a lot of this
and part of the
from.
download. So as I'm coming up with these ideas and constructs, more is like coming into me, almost like Elias asking questions to Gabe. So Elias is a representation of my downloads as I was getting them.
Because Elias is basically your guide, is what I would call it, because it sounds like you were channeling this through. I mean, you're calling it downloads, which is the same thing, but it feels like this book was a bit channeled for you. Because you were getting downloads.
Yeah, when it's where you can question whether it's channeled from an external source or whether it's channeled from us, the co-creators.
Yes, absolutely, because we do have that spark of God in us, so we have the knowledge if we choose to access it. Okay, love that. And so, as we're talking about that religious aspect, you're saying you found all of the teachings very similar, and I've always believed that we may all be on different paths, but we're all heading to the same place, right? That's what I get downloads onto. And I think it's really sad that each religion thinks they're right. They're fighting amongst their own religion. Other religions like, this was not the plan God had. Like us God. I was like, this is we're going to have some answering to do back on the other side is my thought, some of us. But is there anything that stood out for you when you kind of knew we're all going to the same place? Because did you study the Bible? Did you go back to pre-King James translations too? Because a lot got, messed up. So were you going back to
Old Testament and even some documents that have recently been dug up, found, or released?
Like from the Gnostics, from like Mary Magdalene, these type of things? Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Part of it, sure. So one of the huge aha moments for me was as a child, I never really understood. And again, every person has their own beliefs, and I'm not trying to take away from anything. I'm just coming from my point of view. As a child, I never understood why I needed to put God and Jesus on a pedestal. It didn't feel right for me. When I started writing The Infinity Within and actually putting pen to paper. Now, keep in mind that I actually wrote the book 40 plus years ago, but I hired a ghostwriter 40 years ago when I was 20 who kept wanting to make it her own book. And so I ended up firing the ghostwriter and taking all my notes, which was basically the book, and sticking it in a filing cabinet and not touching it until the beginning of 25. My wife was actually the one that was the person that said she had grown up with a pretty challenging childhood. There was a lot of things that were very challenging. You can have a conversation with her about what that means. But
same. We're probably very similar. Okay.
So she always came from a perspective of, why do you look at life this way? Why are you smiling? Why do you look at things the way you do? And I would start softly and ask questions and kind of come from an Elias point of view, and slowly get her to ask. She would ask more questions and be more curious, and so on and so forth. So at the beginning of 25, she says, And by this time I'd written other books. So I'd already had like 4.5 years of authorship behind me now that had been successful. So I was now comfortable writing books. She says, the things you've told me from your book, from your ideas, from the way you look at things have helped me so fundamentally in my life. You have to finish this book for other people. So at the beginning of 25, I sat down for 3 solid months and took all my notes out of my filing cabinet, which was covered in dust,
Right.
Pulled it out and actually started putting it all together. So
Yes.
in the middle of 25 is when it actually got published. So this book has been sitting there for quite some time.
Yes. So your aha moment then was it this realization with your
moment,
yeah.
No, the aha moment was, so back to the childhood and where I was told through the church to kind of pray to God to help me through life and those things, which is perfectly fine. When I was putting pen to paper, a question came to me, and it was a very sharp question in the way that I actually had to pick up the Bible and reread it again. And what it was is it possible that maybe what Jesus was trying to do is not make him or himself or his concept something to pray to, but to really show us and remind us of the power that every one of us has by actually doing the things and then coming back and saying, you will do everything I've done and much more. And if you look at the older testaments and the older writings before it got modified multiple times, it can be read a lot more literal than philosophical or fluffy. There's actually so many chapters and verses when you read them from the point of view that maybe he was just trying to teach us what we can do and remind us what we are. They take on a very pristine way of looking and of seeing the words in a different light.
Yes, because
That
some of
was
the
my
original
aha
texts
moment.
have him saying, God is within. Like it actually, and then it gets mistranslated because the powers that be at the time were saying, "Ooh, we don't want people to. No, they need to come through us, specifically the Roman Catholics."
Yeah, we need to keep you small. We need to keep you little, and we need you to come to us for this.
Yes, you don't get to go straight to God. You have to come through us. When the original texts written were saying, "You have God within."
You
and so
are the God within, yes.
You are the God within. Yes. And I feel like it was a power grab, really. It was what it felt like back, when they did the new book. Anyway, okay, so that was aha moment for you. So then you went through your life kind of not practicing a specific religion. You were more spiritual, right? I mean, because your mind was open to pretty much everything is a possibility with some core beliefs kind of mixed in there.
With a huge tie into curiosity.
Yes. I think, listen, because I could tolerate the way your brain works, you're able to, I feel like, analyze things in a very special way that many people cannot, right? Because they don't have an open enough mind. Like you said, you're an introvert. You never as a child really thought like the other kids. And I'm sure that's kind of carried through life, right? In a special way. If we talk about the game, because you talk a lot about the game of Earth in the book, right? Basically, you have things about the game we agree to forget. If we're all eternal, what's the point? The soul decides to forget, it's unstoppable. Right, that's Earth. We agree to the rules before we get here, which I believe too. And you also say the game is forgetting and then finding the divine within. So to win the game, really the end goal is to remember that you are divine and find the divine within, like reconnect, kind of. Okay, what are we doing in this game?
So if we're this being that exists outside of space and time, and there's only really 3 things that we would do, one of them playing a game, why would a soul pick a 4th dimensional construct called the game of planet Earth to play? What would be interesting? What would be something that would actually intrigue a soul? Well, first we have to ask, what is the game of Earth and what makes it unique? Well, what makes the game of Earth fascinating and unique is it exists in a 4th dimensional construct, meaning that time is the primary motivator. Mm-hmm. And if you go to 3 dimensions and below, time doesn't exist. 5 and above, it exists, but it's not the primary motivator. So the 4th dimensional universe of the game of Earth has a very specific thing that's curious, which is the flow of time. Why would that be interesting to a soul? And I could only come up with one thing that would be fun, interesting, and something enough to go play the game for a while.
Okay.
You want to take a stab?
Well, I mean, I feel like it's almost the intrigue of the unknown, right? That's part of why we forget, because I always think if we knew all the things, if we knew the entire path ahead of us, if we knew all the things, if we remembered the other side, like there would be no point of being here, right? Like we aren't going to get that work done and the lessons learned and all the things. So
I'm
but
going to
tell me
apply a
what?
word to exactly what you just said. So you said
Okay.
everything spot on.
Okay, what's my word?
Experience. Or experience
Experiences.
emotion.
Yes. Emotions that maybe only exist here?
Well, emotions only exist in a time-based universe.
Okay, that makes sense.
You can't have emotions because what are emotions? They ebb, they flow, they start. You have to have a body, and the emotions start here, and then they grow, and they create fear and doubt and love and joy and pain and anger and all these things, but they all exist through the presence of time.
Okay.
Now,
all right.
What's interesting is I'm going to touch on the first 4 rules again, just to kind of bring you back to that space. So rule 1 is we're looking into this game of Earth. We're going to go play. Rule 1 is we agree to leave our godlike abilities outside. Now, why would we do that?
Because again, we aren't going to have human experiences if we know we're God.
It'd be like you and I sitting down to play Monopoly, and I just grab all the money and the properties and say they're mine. Not a very fun game.
There's nothing to do. There's no fun. It's over.
No fun, right?
Yeah.
So we agree to put our abilities up here, but that only kind of solves the problem because here's an example. My favorite dog goes running across the street and gets run over. I don't like it. So I draw on my power, change the whole outcome because I didn't like it. Well, if I'm here to experience emotion to its fullest, I can't very well tie into my abilities completely and be able to change anything I don't like.
Right.
And in comes rule number 2. Rule number 2 is I agree to forget that they're there. Well, that works really well to keep me away from my abilities. However, it also is an infinite time loop trap, which I'm going to assume a soul being probably pretty smart isn't going to do. So then we have rule number 3 comes in, and that is we're going to have turns, and they're going to be lifetimes. And during these turns, there's certain things we have set in front of us to accomplish. And if we don't, we get to do the turn over and over and over again until such time as we figure it out. And then we get to move on to the next turn, the next turn, the next turn, and eventually leave the game. But remember, every single turn, we're here to experience emotions and kind of play in this playground of Monopoly, right? But then we have to take a slightly different channel just to kind of add some nuance to this. And that is, have you ever played tic-tac-toe?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you
and
play
half the time, nobody wins.
Yeah. Actually, once you get it, nobody ever wins.
Exactly. Yeah.
So do you play it now?
No, not really.
How come?
Because it's not fun anymore. Because nobody wins.
Pretty boring. Right.
Right.
Okay,
I mean, I would play with little kids who don't know what they're doing yet because it's fun for them. But right.
Exactly. So now you're a omnipresent entity exists outside of space and time to play a game. Are you going to Are you going to pick tic-tac-toe, or are you going to pick a really tough game?
Yeah, you're going to pick a tough game for sure. It reminds me of the video games everyone's playing, because sometimes you have like infinite lives to play, right? Your character dies, boom, you drop back in. You're doing it again. You're doing it again until you pass that level. Right. And you just keep going and keep going.
And then going with that analogy, as a soul, we probably, especially if we got stuck going over and over and over again, would also agree that we're going to allow ourselves cheat codes as we move through our turns. Mm-hmm. But on top of the cheat codes that we're giving ourselves to reconnect and remember, we've also, and I'm going to go, this particular concept will resonate in different ways for people, but the Gnostics have a concept of the archons. And the archons, based on the true full Gnostic point of view, are these beings that actually are the gods of the creation of reality. So they're the ones that, in theory, created this game. And they created it as a trap for souls so they could feed on the soul's energy, and specifically negative energy. I took a slightly different view on that and said, well, if we're these omnipotent beings, we're probably not going to hand over control to a third-party god. However, what we might do is we might add the concepts of the archons and their ability to create filters and fear and doubt in our turns in order to keep us away from our cheat codes and actually remembering in order to make the game more challenging.
So what would an example of a cheat code be? Just for my friends listening, because we're going to come in with a cheat code. What would some examples of cheat codes be that we might try to bring to our next life?
Each of my out-of-body experiences would be considered a cheat code. My near-death experience, which just as easily could have been a full-on death experience, was definitely a cheat code. Other things that have happened to me through life that are not explainable through normal descriptions are all cheat codes.
So cheat codes are basically in there to help us in the game, help us awaken, essentially, to get back to that divine oneness. And so and does that explain why some people who maybe they haven't lived a lot of lives yet, they don't have any cheat codes, they're not going to essentially feel like they're making as much progress in that spiritual journey, right?
Potentially.
Perhaps. Yeah. Not that everyone has the potential. Of course, we're all God. We all have the potential.
Everybody has their own little path.
Yes, but your concept is saying as we drop back in, like in the video game, we drop back in to do this again, our soul on the other side say, I'm going to drop in some cheat codes in the plan this time. I'm going to help you out. Okay. Or help me, help yourself out essentially when you come back, help my human self out the next time. Okay. So that's kind of what's going on there. I like that. The end goal.
The overall game goal is just to experience emotion. And through that process, eventually leave.
And would you say then the goal is also to try and live authentically the way you planned, accomplish some of the things maybe that in this turn you were thinking you'd work on? Just
Rule 4.
Living authentically?
Rule 4.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We got rules, guys.
When we're playing, we agree to be 100% invested in the game when we're playing.
Yes. And that is probably why when people are off their path and not living authentically, things just aren't going as planned. That's why we feel that pull. We feel that pull like something's wrong, something's off. Like, what am I doing here?
I've got friends that for a period in their life had nothing but quote unquote bad luck. All kinds of horrible stuff happened to them, like one after the other after the other.
Yeah.
Now, that could have been part of what they were here to experience, or it could have been they were out of resonance with their path, or it could be both.
Could be both.
But again, if our goal is to experience, being off our path for a while might be part of the experience.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about, I just put this quote down because I liked it. Awakened souls are lamps in the dark. So to me, that felt like those of us who are awakening are lighting the way for others. Now we don't put a rope around them and drag them in. That will never work. Right? Is my thought. So I like the fact that we were talking about we're a lamp, we're a light to attract people to find their divine, to send that out into the universe. But they still have to find their way to the light, right? You still make decisions on what you do with that lamp because you talk about that in the book too. So I liked all of that. I'm just quoting your stuff here. Do you remember all this, Kris?
I do.
Because you have the soul's path is not a journey of becoming. It's a journey of remembering. When you release doubt, you will finally see yourself as you are. Divine, limitless, and eternal. This was towards the end of the book. This was kind of like, after Gabe and I had spent time together, had gone over lots of things throughout this book.
This was actually right after the Orchard Hush.
Yeah, the Orchard Hush, because you start with Orchard Hush, Orchard Illusions, a lot of play with the orchard, which they kind of were walking through. Is that right?
Yeah, the orchard was a place that Elias took him that he had taken prior students. And it was a place of solitude and connection, arguably a nexus on earth for accessing and remembering easy.
Do you also say the teacher's lit lamp in the dark so we might find our way, but the walk is still ours to make, and so is the choice to become a lamp for others in time. And then you talk about embodying the teachings. Doubt is the veil, unstoppable but responsible for the world around you. So you give some suggestions about recording successes, staying in love frequency, like all of this. And are those that trifecta that you talk about in the book? Is that something you channeled through as far as like how to Is that to stay on path? What's the trifecta used for?
I'd say that yes, you're right on, and that is that trifecta allows the continual remembrance. And so if the archons are here to make the game difficult and place fear and doubt in our way, then the trifecta is the light that sees through the veil and helps us remove fear and doubt from the equation.
Yes. And the trifecta, explain the trifecta really quick.
Right. So let's say for a minute that we believe all this and we want to start accessing and remembering what we are, but we'd prefer not to do it through an NDE. So near-death experiences are a great way to see things. However, I would not suggest them for anybody because they're very black-white, and that is that it's either a near-death or it's a death experience, right? But what I can tell you is that anybody that I've talked to that's gone through an NDE has a very different look on what reality is.
Yes.
And so I would say that an NDE is that for a moment in time, or even a few moments in time, all doubt has been removed from the equation, and it changed from a death experience to a near-death experience because you tapped into what you really are. Now, how do you do that without going through that process? Well, it's designed to be a little more difficult, but let's say that, I got a perfect example. There's a school in India now that they have kids that have these little paper triangles sitting on needles.
I've seen this video.
And they're in little glass globes, so wind isn't blowing it, and they're concentrating on spinning it. Now, that seems fairly silly unless you take a look at what it really is representing for our mind and our remembrance. And that is that you start spinning it, and then you start acknowledging that you're actually the one spinning it, and then you're actually able to gain control over both directions and speed. What is that really doing at a subconscious level? And so by the trifecta and remembering and writing successful notes down, well, what am I really saying? The first time much younger age, I was doing a lot of these types of things. And what I found is there was always these two emotions that followed each other right after I did something. So let's say I set aside and I wanted to spin this thing, and I'm concentrating and I'm doing this, and I finally get in the flow and I spin it. Well, the first emotion I feel is this incredible elation. Oh my goodness, I did what I've been trying to do. And within milliseconds, blam, in comes fear and doubt. No, you didn't.
No, I didn't do that.
This didn't really happen. And so by documenting wins, you start tearing off pieces of this fear and doubt stuff that comes in really fast. And when you start seeing fear, I consider fear to be like a signpost. It's designed to get our attention and be curious about what it's doing there and how is it serving me right now? And do I really need it anymore? And then when I ask those questions, all of a sudden the fear starts dissipating. And then underneath it, usually underneath the fear is usually doubt of I can't do this, or it's impossible, or I've been told I can't, or whatever the doubt is. And when I start tearing away at that doubt and start doing things and documenting it, and just if doubt comes in, you accept it. You say, I see you. Now let's go do it again. And let's do it again. And eventually you start spinning that disc. And then all of a sudden, if that's possible, well, wait a minute. I've been told since I was a child that I'm imagining this stuff, that I ate the wrong food, that I'm having nightmares or dreams. Well, what if all these nightmares and dreams are actually looking through the veil and showing us what we're able to do? And then by slowly carving away at fear and doubt, we start reattaching to what we are.
Yes. Do you have a meditation practice?
Yes and no. I've tried.
I just feel like you could probably see some cool things.
Yeah, meditation is great. And there's a lot of powerful things in sitting quietly. And I forget what type of meditation it's called, but where, when you're sitting quietly, a lot of times your brain is very active in throwing things at you. Thoughts pop up.
Sure.
And what I was taught by some of the folks I've worked with is you see the thought, you accept it, you acknowledge it, and then you let it go.
Mhm.
and then you move on, and eventually you get to a point of quiet. And that's where the profound stuff starts. Another form of meditation for me is creativity. When I get
Yes.
into my zone of creating, I feel very connected.
Yep, because you've pushed yourself into some serious right brain stuff. You've kind of turned off that left brain. Because a lot of people, and when I say meditation, I don't even mean that you have to be sitting quietly, right? Some people take walks, do creative things, like you said, they draw, they paint. This is all forms of meditation, right? You don't just have to close your eyes and pretend you're not thinking about anything. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. I was just curious if you had any big moments, because it seems like your brain could do that if you so wished. Okay. All right. So back to 3. So we talked about recurring successes. Then you say stay in love frequency. So are there tips for that? Because with everything going on in the world, it's a little tricky sometimes right now for people to stay in a love frequency.
I'll take you down a side path. This comes from my concept of what I've said for years, well, ever since I was probably 15, is there are no such things as coinkydinks.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I mean by that? Well, ever since I went to coffee shops and restaurants on my own, I'd be sitting there reading my own books, reading my own stuff, being in my own space, and random people would pull up a chair, not even ask me, just pull up a chair, sit down, tell me their life story, actually tell me things that you wouldn't even tell your best friend, have a whole lot of discussion, get up and walk away. I'd never see them again. It's like, so for years, it was like, well, this is just really odd. Does this happen a lot to people? I mean, I don't see this happening to very many people. This is just really weird. But then I got very curious about it. And I said, okay, so let's take a look at what's really happening underneath the curtain, so to speak. And when I really looked into it, every single one, and we're talking hundreds of people that came and talked to me, told me their stories, and we had a discussion, and they got up and went away. Every single one of them, when I really looked into it, they came to hear something I had to say, and I needed to hear something they had to say. And so what became very clear to me is these were not coincidences. These were not coinkydinks of people just doing this. We're already always interconnected. We are co-creation beings. And when we need to have an adjustment in our path, and it's a certain adjustment we need, we make connections until we find somebody that has a similar direction. And then we have a conversation like we're doing right now, because we already agreed that this is something we wanted to do or needed to do up here.
Because we are all part of the oneness. We are all interconnected because of that divinity, that piece of God that we all have. We are all one, right? So it would make sense that we will be magnetized towards the people and the conversations that we need to have to find the answers we need to have. Yeah, so that makes total sense. So to stay in the love frequency, right? What I'm hearing is like, we need to remember that we're all connected, right? Because I say all the time, even the neighbor that you hate, even the, you know what I mean? Like, that you didn't get more God than them. We all got the same, and we are all connected. So when we think of it that way, is that what you're saying will help us stay in the love frequency?
That's part of it.
Okay.
The next part of the story is I was talking to one of the people that had read my book, and she had said, you know, it was like a week or two before we were talking. She said somebody had sat down. She was minding her own business. She was in a restaurant. She was doing her own thing. Somebody sat down and started talking to her. And her initial reaction was, what the hell? Why is this person doing this? They're interrupting my time, my space. I'm here quietly. And she said, I actually felt kind of angry. But instead of lashing out at this person, she decided to sit with it and hear what they had to say. And about 10 minutes into the discussion, they had an aha moment from something the person said. And it shifted her entire perception of what had just happened. And so what I'm trying to say is, if there are no such things as coinkydinks, when we're operating in life is to be more aware that there's little miracles happening every moment, but we're taught to ignore them and instead stay in the presence of love and stay in the presence of connection. And when some random person comes up and starts chatting, instead of saying, oh my goodness, I just can't take this, this is out of my space, I'm not comfortable, is to take some time and open some space, because there's a very high probability you actually were part of the transaction ahead of time to have it happen anyway. And so when you're open to it, you get to experience the miracle for what it is instead of closing yourself off and disconnecting.
Yes, that makes sense. Record successes, stay in the love frequency, and then I reform my divine identity.
If we're taught as children that we don't see ghosts and that we are small and disconnected, and that's how we operate through life, what I mean by reforming that is to start opening up and remembering that we're connected and be more open to the miracles as they happen. Basically, what it's saying is when you're doing a reform or remembering, what you're really doing is instead of going to the place, I'm small, disconnected, I get angry, I get these things, you're reforming it or remembering it into, I'm a connected being, come from a place of source and love, and staying in that space.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the trifecta that we can use as we're playing this life game, right? Trying to get back to divinity and accomplish all the work that we pre-planned before we got here. So do you believe that at some point we will not need to play this game anymore on Earth? Is like an ascension process? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that gets into a lot of different questions. I would, in the concept or construct I've put together as an idea, we're here to experience emotion and have fun with it. And when I say fun, I mean all the emotions, all the feelings and everything. So we could come in, agree to play a certain number of games, a certain number of turns, and accomplish certain things. And let's say, 100 turns later, we finish and we leave. Well, we could have had a blast and said, I want to go play that again. I mean, instead of looking at this as a thing that we do once, I mean, we're infinite beings based on the description we've discussed. Yeah. So we could play the whole game to its fruition and say, well, that was a blast. I think I want to go do it again.
Yeah. So it feels like divinity-wise, all the options stay open, guys, right? There's no completion. And it's hard for human brains to wrap around infinity, right? Like eternity, infinity. It feels a little overwhelming. So, and that's part of the plan. Like we're supposed to feel a little overwhelmed by all this stuff, right? That's part
I've
of
always, as a child, been told the universe is infinite. Okay, great. What's on the other side? That's the first place.
Nothing. It's infinite.
Exactly.
It never ends. So that would mean that there are endless possibilities. So you can't really look at anyone in the eye and say, no, that's not true. No, that's not possible. Of course it's possible. Everything is possible if we're subscribing to this infinity eternity thing. Like nothing's off the table is what I feel like. So what do you say to people that say, then why do bad things happen to good people? Because that's a big one in the religious world. Well, no, God wouldn't do that. Right?
Many people ask me that question, and I come back with a question. Do you, or how many people do you know, enjoy and watch horror movies?
Right. Yeah, because we're obviously interested. Yeah, it's interesting. What you're saying is it's obviously interesting to the human brain, these experiences, right?
So if you see horror movies, and this is you as a human being, now take a viewpoint from an infinite being's point of view. What does a horror movie look like?
I mean, just it's entertainment. It's feeling more emotions that we were trying to feel.
The whole gambit.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the wonderful, the ugly. We're not here to have 100% good feelings. That would not be a very fun game.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that horrible things are fun. By no means am I saying they're fun, but I could definitely see how a soul might want to experience a whole gambit of things in order to get that dichotomy. Because the way you really feel love and joy is if you've had some not nice things happen. Because it's that black and whiteness, that dichotomy, that gives the texture and the flavor of emotion and the highs and the lows.
Yes. And a lot of this we may have actually, it's hard to grasp that we may have planned for some of these things. And sometimes you have to reframe them into those things didn't break me. They built me. They built me to where I am now so that I could have these experiences and feel all the, like you said, all the emotions from the whole gambit and move on from that. Yeah. Because I think it's hard. Because if you're going to subscribe to the oneness that we're there's one thing and we are that, right? The divinity, then you go, okay, but you're saying God murdered that child. I don't know. You know what I mean? Because that serial killer is part of the oneness, right? And it's hard to grasp, like God planned that. Like it's hard to grasp. Yeah.
So what I want to take us just a side channel and say, for those people in the middle of really hard times right now, it's hard. It's not easy. And it's pretty hard to hear these kinds of discussions because when you're in the middle of the battle, when you're in the middle of the fearful, harmful things going on, it feels really real. Well, why? Because rule 4 is we're 100% vested into this game. However, almost all of the people I've talked to that have had very difficult things happening, close people, friends, family die, different things like this, after they've gone through the extremely difficult thing, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is usually a change for the good of, granted, the thing that happens, not good. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is that when you get out of it, the way you look at life, the way you see things, the way you work in life after those things usually is in a much brighter sense. It's kind of like, well, I went through this really harmful time or difficult time, and now the good things that happen are much realer for me. The texture is much brighter for me because I had to go through this in order to get here. Does that make sense?
Yes, because that's why a lot of times you said we're in this game requires time. Like we have to be in a state of time. And so that's why people will say, give it time. Time heals. That's because the passing of time allows us to see things from a different viewpoint, from a different light. And those hard things change us, right? And if we can try and stay focused on them changing us for the better, eventually, obviously, when you're in the trenches, none of this makes any sense, right? And that's why they say, give it time, give it a minute, right? Because I've had to do that with, like your wife, you said she had a lot of things going on in her childhood. So did I. So the time, now that I'm an adult, now I can look back and say, those things built me. Those things made me who I am. Right? I learned so much, but in the moment, oh no, you just don't want to hear that. So yeah, you guys, we don't roll up on our friends that just lost their loved one, a week ago with all this junk. No, it's not, it's just not going to hit right. We need time to feel the emotions we wanted to feel, right? Like to absorb them and handle it. Okay. Listen, Kris, you're a deep thinker, my friend. I kind of love it. Yeah. I feel like I could talk about 10,000 more things. It's because I have many more little things I wrote down from your book. But you guys get this book and read it or listen to it. I did the audiobook, and you have a guy kind of like, I don't know, he feels very ominous. The guy who reads your audiobook.
Can I tell you a story about him?
Yeah.
So this is an ego story. I'm just going to warn everybody. This is something that just really hit me in a really positive way. And it really hit my ego in a positive way. So I am bragging a bit. However, it really hit home for me.
Yeah.
So when I finished the book, I wanted a voice that would lend a certain feeling to it. And so I did a ton of research. And I found this gentleman named Eduardo Bellini. And I'm probably butchering his name, but that's pretty close. Eduardo he's narrated, I believe, over 750 books. He's an award-winning narrator. He has done books for Eckhart Tolle, Dean Koontz, the Dalai Lama, and a whole bunch of top books in the industry. So we're not talking small stuff.
Oh, you can tell. Yeah.
So I get a hold of him, and the first thing he tells me is, yeah, Kris, I'm going to be a little expensive. And I said, I get that. I understand. I mean, he's also an actor and I believe a screenwriter, and I think he's on a TV series as we speak. So anyway, the second thing he said was, my schedule is really busy, and so I probably won't be able to get to this. I might not be able to get to this until the middle of 26. I said, I get that too. I said, but I really want your voice. I think you're the right person for the book. He said, okay. So we got all of the stuff done, and Audible, the narrator has to do a 15-minute trial piece in order to kind of formalize the contract. So Eduardo goes ahead and does his 15-minute piece, and the next day gets a hold of me and he says, yeah, Kris, I'm not putting this book down. I've postponed all my other stuff, and I'm going to finish it this week.
See?
And he did.
It all lined up. He caught on. He got the vibe. He got on board.
He told me, he says, I'm doing this book. I'm finishing it now.
Like you said, though, people need to connect. You probably planned this ahead. Like, I'm going to need him at this point in my game of life. Yeah. Because his voice, you guys, is it's perfect for this spiritual vibe too. He feels almost like he has the voice of a spiritual guru. You know what I mean? I don't know. It was a good match. Yeah. You had a good pick on that. So I love that all turned out perfectly for you. And so do you have any final thoughts? Because do you have any other just practical tools off the top of your head that us midlifers could be using right now to finish this game of life stronger?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a couple things that come to mind. The first one is when feeling fear, when feeling stopped, we're taught to think of it as a bad thing. My suggestion would be to look at it as a signpost and start being curious. So when you feel like you're fearful about maybe asking for a raise or taking this next step or doing this next thing or confronting a particular challenge and you feel that fear raise up, like usually it happens in the body first, is be curious. Where is this coming from? Why is it here? What purpose is it serving for me today? And do I need it going forward? These are all very powerful questions that allow you to take ownership of the choice instead of being fearful of the choice. And so that I would say is probably one of the things that's most important that I try to, the book, The Infinity Within, is really about remembering. However, like I said, I think fear and doubt are designed to make the game more challenging and difficult, but also stop us from achieving the things that we might want to achieve in each of our lives or turns. And if we look at fear as a signpost instead of a bad thing and be curious about it, it really does shift from I'm fearful of this thing to I have the ability to make some decisive decisions on what I want to do with this thing.
Yeah. Yep. So really feel into it. You gotta, feel the feelings, move forward.
And
don't be scared. Because fear will shut us down, right?
Yes, it will, unless we're curious about it.
Yes. Well, here's what I'm thinking, Kris. I don't know what you got planned next, but I bet you have a plan for something next because you seem like you always got some irons in the fire. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what's next for you, but I think, listen, you already have your Elias. I feel like you have more to channel. So have you thought about this? I feel like your brain has the ability and your soul to get through more information, to channel more as we head into this, what feels like kind of that awakening period, right? And I feel like you're going to have more coming through. Are you open to that? Are you doing that?
So when I wrote the book 40 years ago, it was just the book. There was no thought beyond that because it was a pretty significant download and a pretty significant piece of how it drove my life. When I took all my notes and started writing it from an author perspective, like getting it into written form in a way that I wanted, it actually became a trilogy.
Okay. So we've got 2 more.
So book 2 is actually, I've already finished my 3rd draft of book 2, which is called The Orchard Hush.
Okay.
And I'm probably 1 or 2 drafts away from completing it and getting ready to publish it. I've already designed with my cover art designers, and I have already designed the cover art for both books 2 and 3. Book 3 is already, the outline is done. I haven't done any detailed work yet, but the outline was done because I have an arc that starts from book 1, beginning all the way to the end of book 3. And then I have arcs that cross from book 1 into 2 and 2 into 3, and then arcs within each of the books. And so I needed to, when I was really writing The Infinity Within, I needed to understand the much larger picture as I'm writing book 1 in order to really have it be a much bigger picture. And
okay, so you've already channeled through book 2 and 3. We don't have it to get in our hands yet, guys, but it's coming. Okay, so you're busy. All right. Well, this is obviously what you're supposed to be doing because you're kicking these books out quick and you're getting them to publish. It feels like this is all lining up perfectly for you. I love it. Okay, well, we have to keep our eye out. You guys go do book 1 now. There's lots of information in it. And then you can head on to 2 and 3 as they come out. So obviously everything, all the links to Kris are in the show notes to get your hands on the book, to look at other things he has going on. And just read all about it. You've had a lot going on your whole life, Kris. Am I right? Like you don't sit still.
I do quite a few parallel things, yes.
You keep it moving because you also have a wife and some kids and you got a lot of things going on at all moments. Yeah.
I also have a marketing company as well as the book writing and publishing company. And then I also do some real estate stuff as well.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, you got a lot of plates spinning, but you seem to be like it's not too much. Like you're still accomplishing everything you've been wanting to accomplish.
Yeah, I enjoy the creation of things. That is what drives me, is I love creating, building, and doing things.
And that sounds like your form of meditation, like you said. You get in that creative zone, and that is meditative for you. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, Kris, I mean, I could keep you all day because I got more quotes from the book written down, but listen.
Well, I really appreciate that you listened to it and brought it up. It means a lot to me that you took the time to listen to it and enjoy it.
Yeah. And it was cool. It felt, like I said, it felt like it wasn't boring memoir like I've gotten a hold of before. It was, it felt fictional, but knowing it was all true. And a lot of the concepts in it were already in my mind. Like I already was like, yep, I agree with that. That sounds right. So it felt very validating for feelings I already have and beliefs that I already have too. So it seemed to, I liked it. So I highly recommend you guys.
Yeah. And if you get a chance, and then all of the listeners, anybody that does get the book, one of the things that's the most powerful you can do for me is to write reviews and let me know what you got from it and what the wins were, because that helps guide me in the other books as I'm writing them on what's working and what's not.
Especially since you've got 2 more books coming. It'll help guide you.
And what I found is what's been very satisfying and rewarding for me is so far I've gotten pretty much all 5-star reviews, and they all say things along the lines of, it wasn't preachy. It didn't tell me what to think. It was more like sitting down with my best friend and having a story about life.
Yes. And just kind of felt like I was overhearing a spiritual conversation between 2 people. Right. And I was just kind of in the back seat learning. Yeah. That's what it felt like. Okay. Yeah. I'll put that in a review form. All right, Kris. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. And you guys, I recommend the book and go to his site, see everything he's got going on. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. Thank you, Kris. Listen, I know your time is valuable. And right now I'm feeling super grateful and totally humbled that you chose to hang out with me today. If this podcast resonates with you, could you do me a solid and hit that subscribe or follow button? That's going to help you out because you're never going to miss an episode. And it helps me out because you're never going to miss an episode. And if you have like 30 seconds more, could you leave a 5-star rating and maybe leave a kick-ass review? Thank you so much, and I can't wait to continue our journey on the next episode. Oh, and I can't forget the fine print. The legal jargon. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We're just 2 friends on this journey together, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional. You get it. See you next time.